So my name is Mike Louie. I'm with NWN Corporation, and today I'm the National Networking Practice Lead for NWN, and I'm going to talk to you guys today about cyber threat defense, the architecture from Cisco that really integrates all the security products together. Now this is more of a mid-level presentation, so we're not going to get too deep into the weeds. I do have some technical content at the end for some people that are more technical to show you how some of these use cases and integrations work. But the main point is that I want to kind of demonstrate how Cisco's overall architecture from a security perspective is really highly integrated to provide ease of operations, lots of visibility, and enhanced protection. So real quick, I'm just going to do a quick background on security up to 2016. So we all know that security is number one focus. If you talk to anybody or read any trade mag, security, 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 right? CEOs all the way down to the technical level are very concerned about security today. We had Target, $200+ million in losses. Anthem, the U.S. health insurer, lost almost 100 million. So security numbers, and then Juniper Networks even happens to security companies like them. Obviously, they got reverse engineered. I don't know if you ever heard about this, but one of their firewall products had a basically wide open backdoor password encoded in the base code. So they were able to reverse engineer it, and all these firewalls that the United States government had deployed, you can actually just run in with this password and get access to it. So fairly interesting. I mean, it's all different places. It's not just about malware. It's just about having a secure infrastructure, having secure data, and managing your losses appropriately. So what's that? Well, the annual cost, this varies depending on who you talk to. Usually it's anywhere between 2 and 10 million on average from a loss perspective. That adds up in all the operational costs, all the brand costs. Some of them can be much higher, like Target. The annual cost of cybercrime globally, 400 billion, some say up to 2 trillion. But the interesting thing is many moons ago, security was all about, security protection was all about more or less brand protection, stopping, the script kiddies of the world from defacing your website. But as you can see, these costs, they align with something else. And the big thing is there's a ton of money to be had today to be a cyber criminal, right? So a good example of this is a piece of malware called Angler. And in 2015, Cisco and Talos shut down Angler. So Angler was a 3-person organization. It was run by two guys in Russia and a guy in the United States. They were generating $30 million a year with ransomware on an average $300 cost recovery. So typical like a crypto locker kind of situation. But that was 3 guys making $30 million, and they don't get taxed on that. So they get to reinvest all those dollars too. So you can see that they're very well funded, right? So I mean, where else can you go besides Silicon Valley and make that kind of money? So this is just one example. The worst part about it was countless dollars, more than 30 million, I'm sure, was spent to shut this down. I mean, it involved the FBI and everybody else. And 15 days later, it showed back up. So they shut these guys down. They had, were working with cloud service providers, building their command and control servers and everything. And then 15 days later, somebody else copied it, changed the code, popped it back up, and it's back out there. So there's really no stopping this or discouraging this because there's so much money in it, and there's really no deterrent for the attackers. I apologize for the font here, but the interesting thing is, the cyber criminals today are the new bank robbers, except they don't get shot at anymore, right? They have complete anonymity. They don't have to wear masks. They can do this on a 24/7 basis, and basically, the chances of getting caught are extremely low, right? So this is going to be a constant slide, something everybody's going to have to deal with one day or another. The bad news, I'm sure you've seen these statistics before. Target spent more money than anybody's ever spent on security from a corporate standpoint. They got hacked in 18 days. They had all the information. They actually went back and did the forensics on their systems, and it turned out to be an operational issue. They had all the alerts. They had all the intelligence you could imagine to track this attack. Basically, they came in and they got on the point of sale systems and they exfiltrated the data. They knew that the data was leaving their network. When they went back and did forensics on it, they saw the tracking. So it wasn't a lack of visibility. What it was a lack of security operations capability. So they had a security operations center that was getting so many alerts and so much noise that they happened to ignore. So that's one of the key things that a lot of security solutions like cyber threat defense are really aiming to try to solve. Because if you can't take all that intelligence that you're gathering and put it into meaningful, actionable intelligence, kind of staff ranked, so you can make decisions. All you've got is just a bunch of alerts that you're eventually not going to pay any attention to. I mean, how many in here have deployed SolarWinds, for instance, right? So when you turn it on the first time, you just get a zillion email alerts, and after a while, what do? Right? You turn off the email alerts, right? So now that's effectively useless technology. Unless you need it for a point-in-time investigation, it's not really doing you anything. It takes a lot of time and effort to tune a thing like SolarWinds or any security product properly to really kind of get some actionable intelligence out of it. The other bad thing is that because of the evasiveness of malware today, it's, in a lot of cases, people are protected for up to 260 days. And a lot of this just has to do with not having integrated approaches, buying a best-of-breed firewall that doesn't actually communicate to your endpoint system, buying a SIM product that's not properly tuned, that's not actually providing you the daily reports, that's actually telling you, from the context of attack, where am I infected, what systems were infected, how serious are these systems to my organization, how are they going to impact our day-to-day operations, where should I focus my time? Most people are just getting a slew of alerts and they just randomly pick one and try to focus on it. So to change the landscape, obviously we had viruses. So is anybody in here can kind of tell me the difference between a virus and malware, like one of the main differences? Does anybody have? Audience. All right, so viruses for the most part are very static. So you used to just find things like code red or something in the environment, and you would have a group of security researchers at Symantec or something would reverse engineer the code. They would write a definition. That definition would get downloaded onto an agent running on your PC, and then that local database would scan for that particular instance of that code on your system, and that's how you would detect malicious code. Today, you've got advanced persistent threats. So you actually have malware that's written to only detonate in one particular environment in one particular customer, right? And there's hundreds and hundreds of different deviations of that particular piece of malware. So you can't, the point is you can't depend on a security research team at an antivirus company to reverse engineer malicious code, write a definition for it that you then download. You have to have something much more dynamic and much more capable of detecting a day zero threat, right? So we're using different tools today, intelligence and analytics that are coming from the cloud. We're basically cloud sourcing more and more security data from across the world, pumping it into these big security intelligence operations centers, and then pushing those down to our security products to make them more intelligent. Because you just, like I said, that static database just doesn't work. So another really interesting point, just to understand the landscape, there are lots of malware writers out there today that have a 24/7 tech support. So if you're trying to hack into a company, you have a particular product, there are malware writers in other countries that will actually take a phone call to an 800 number or to an IRC chat and will actually help you use that particular piece of software that you purchased from them to exfiltrate data, to hack into to deface somebody's website. So they actually have a customer care center just like NWN has a NOC, but it's dedicated to that piece of software. So that's pretty scary. The other piece is, like the example of the 30 million, one of the reasons why you have to have more and more security products and have to be ever evolving is that a lot of these guys that are writing malware, because they're making money off of it, they actually buy the same products that we deploy. So they'll buy FortiGate, they'll buy Cisco, they'll buy Juniper, and they'll put those in their labs and reverse engineer against them to make sure that they can avoid detection. So if you've seen FireEye, that product came out, one of the first to market. It was a great sandboxing solution. It quickly got defeated because a lot of these guys picked up that product, put it in their environment, figured out how it worked, reversed engineered it, made their malware intelligent enough to figure out that they're running in a virtual environment, and they can evade detection. So, sandboxing alone wasn't the silver bullet. Everybody thought that was the way to detect day zero attacks, but you got to apply more intelligence, not just detonating inside of a virtual environment. So the real cost of malware. This question comes up more often than not when I talk to customers. It's like, how do I operationalize security? Where do I start? How do I know how bad the situation is, right? And that's really where we're going to get into Cisco's cyber threat defense and how it focuses on 3 key parameters to help us get there. What systems were impacted, what's the scope? And obviously, malware, like I just said, is increasingly evasive and reverse engineered. So how do we approach this? So Cisco has a ton of security products. We have firewalls, we have web content gateways, we have email security, we have endpoint protection with anti-malware, we have LAN code. So all of those products, they all focus on three different things. First, we have to increase our visibility, right? We have to increase our visibility not through just our firewall, we have to increase it across the whole technology deployment. So if I have a web content gateway, and I have a firewall, and I have an endpoint, I want them all sharing the same data. That's key. I can't have three different consoles with three different sets of information. I'll never be able to effectively figure anything out. They all have to kind of have a common ecosystem. Enhancing the protection. Once that data is kind of shared, that intelligence shared, then they have to actually deploy protections. They have to change ACLs. They have to change security root tags. They have to change firewall rules. How do they do that? How does one product communicate to another? That's really what cyber threat defense is really going to be about. And then simplifying operations. How do you make it one rule for all systems, right? In a much more cohesive. How do you tie them all together? I'll get into that in just a little bit. So CTD is really a reference architecture for how to put all these security products together. And if anybody's deployed, even simply, an ASA with firepower, an AMP for endpoints, and maybe AMP for networks on your new firepower deployments, you've already started with the CTD architecture. For example, the ASA with firepower services can share information with the AMP for endpoints. So AMP for endpoints, if it detects a threat, it can communicate back via the AMP cloud that's then integrated with the firepower to tell you about, through the firepower management console, talk to you about file trajectory, device trajectory, what systems were impacted, sharing this intelligence, and then updating rules in the firewall to subsequently protect you. So that's one example of just really kind of simple integration. Another example may be if you had Cisco ICE, there's a subset of this technology called firepower threat defense. So ICE can allow you might not know what ICE is in here, Cisco ICE, Identity Services Engine. It's the access control system for your network, so it authenticates users much like a wireless network, but it's a wired wireless VPN. It'll authenticate a user, let them on and off the network based on if they're an iPad or if they're a member of Active Directory. So it's an authentication mechanism, right? Well, when you have ASA with firepower, you can actually authenticate that user to the network. They get malware on them. Now firepower detects the malware. It tells ICE to kick the user off the network dynamically. So now you can quarantine devices automatically, all through the perspective of another unit telling another unit that it's found malware. And that's what really the cyber threat defense starts to build upon. So what are the benefits of increased visibility? Obviously, this intelligence sharing, like I talked about a little bit more, finding questionable activity. A great example of increasing visibility is, let's say that you have a PC on your network, and on average, it sends a gig of data up to the web, Dropbox, right? And then Saturday, it sends 25 gig of data to someplace in China, right? That's abnormal behavior, right? Because on average, that PC typically just interoperates with Dropbox, but over the weekend, it exfiltrates 25 gig of data. Maybe that was your healthcare records, maybe that was student information, what have you. So by increasing the visibility of your security platform, you should be able to detect those types of situations. Now the way that we do that, I can get into a little bit more about, is with products like ASA with firepower services. It can detect malware. It can detect, with LandCope, we can detect data leakage situations like that. LandCope is a Netflow technology that we can actually export flow data from our switches in our environment, not from the perspective of just the firewall. We can actually look at all the traffic that's going on our switches as well. ICE obviously can provide us information about, is it an iPad, is it who is the user that's logged in, and all that data can all be correlated, and we can present rules in the firewall or visibility via LandCope to kind of give us a little bit more perspective on what's going on. And then let's see how we enhance protection. So comprehensive approach. So you got gateways, endpoints, and network environments and virtual environments. So gateways are web security gateways or email security gateways. Cisco embeds AMP, anti-malware protection, in all of our web gateways and email security gateways. Endpoints are the AMP for endpoints product, rides on top of the PC. And then you actually have AMP's file scanning capabilities embedded inside of the firewall or inside of the appliances as well. We talked about that sandboxing a little bit. That's really not dictated here, but all of these gateways and instances of AMP for everywhere, they all can punt If they get a situation where they don't understand if it's a good or bad file, they can actually submit that to a cloud-based sandbox for dynamic analysis that can then feed back into these systems to provide us with an updated rule, even with a day zero situation. So, you know, today's attacks are super sophisticated and may or may not target multiple individuals, so hence we need that sandboxing dynamic capability. And here's some of the products from a protection standpoint that we already kind of discussed. LAN code Stealth Watch. I mentioned that before. LAN code can be in a network as a sensor, can detect malware on the network and inform ICE to kick the user off, or LAN code could potentially inform the fire site management console, and via the remediation API can write an ACL or access control list that would block that user as well. So the interesting thing about LAN code, because you can actually collect the flow data from your network devices, you don't have to actually put a sensor out, for instance, at the edge of your network. So if you had 3560s or 3750s in remote offices, and you don't have a firewall out there, but you may benefit from having an IPS out there, typically it's not affordable to go and put an IPS in every part of your network just to gain some security visibility. But with LAN code, you can actually export the flow data into a collector. So SolarWinds has Netflow collection today. You may use like the flow monitor or something like that. It tells you application, tells you bits and bytes, application usage. You guys might use Netflow today. You can take that same data set and apply analytics to it from a security perspective. So instead of looking at application performance, you look at data leakage. So you just apply a different set of rules to that. But because it's supported on wireless LAN controllers, because the Netflow export is supported on switches, it's supported on the AnyConnect client today, you're getting this basic passive IPS or IDS monitoring capability everywhere. So you can collect data from any point without having to deploy a security device to it. So now you get security visibility, and integrating that with the fire site management console or ICE, now you can actually basically protect, you can issue a protection command to kick the user off the network and protect it. So you have this concept of kind of this virtual firewall by taking all the data from LAN code and then making security decisions based on it. Does that make sense? Yeah. So simplifying operations, same thing here. The whole message is really about, as we integrate all these products, when we talk about integrating ICE, when we talk about integrating LAN code, making all these systems, all their APIs kind of intercommunicate, it gives us that single point of management, which typically is going to be the fire site management console or the LAN code console, where we can issue the same commands to remediate, monitor, report on, and gain intelligence. So that's really what it's all about with simplified operations. The biggest problem is that when you buy a bunch of point products from 5 different companies, they all have different management consoles and they don't share any information. With cyber threat defense, we're really getting to the point that we're trying to make security more effective by really telling each other what's going on. And I have a pretty good slide up here about that concept. So perimeter security alone is not efficient. So mainly meaning a firewall is not the be-all end-all anymore, because threats come in beyond the firewall. You let people on your network, they don't necessarily come from the outside. Systems get infected with USB drives. So the firewall at the perimeter, it doesn't protect you from the east-west traffic. This is where LAN code really comes into play, because it's monitoring this east-west traffic flow. The firewall is blind to it. So I already covered this for you guys a little bit. This is the LAN code. This is kind of the heart of the cyber threat defense network as a sensor approach. You can actually feed security feeds into the LAN code Stealth Watch collector. You can provide contextual information from Cisco ICE. Is it an iPad? Is it the CEO's AD account? All linked to the flow. You can then roll it all up for reporting, and then there's an API with PX Grid where you can actually push out rules. So, what is PX Grid? So you're going to hear a lot about this going forward. Basically, this is the information sharing element that is going to come basically into every Cisco product that's out there today. And what's really significant about this is how many people deploy ACS today? Access Control System. Right? And what's the ACS do for you guys? You wireless authentication, VPN authentication. All right. So have you? What version are you on? 5, 4?
I want to say probably
4. 4. Okay. 4.2 or something. Yeah. Okay. So ACS is going to be deprecated, right? So the new platform going forward is going to be ICE. So ISC got the capability to support TACACs like two revisions ago. And that was the big sticking point. For a long time, ICE was really expensive, really sophisticated, did a lot of stuff from an access control perspective. People really didn't need in their network. They just needed ACS. Yep.
I'm sorry, we replaced ACS with ICE.
Okay, all right, cool. So this is my point. So whether you want to be on ICE or not, if you have ACS, you're eventually going to be on ICE, right? The price-wise, now they support TACACs, is comparable to what you would have paid to upgrade ACS. Okay, so you're not getting into the situation where, oh, it's really expensive upgrade. It's the same to get the base level functionality, except it's no longer going to be the ACS platform, it's going to be the ICE platform. So you'll be able to take your ICE now, which is really a much more intelligent access control platform, and you'll be able to leverage this kind of glue, so to speak, from a security information element called PX Grid. And this is a great slide. So PX Grid allows you to share information between various security systems. So you have a firewall that doesn't have AD integration, right? It doesn't talk to LDAP. So how do you get the information over to the firewall so they can make a decision based on a user versus just an ACL, right? So PX Grid can take identity information from ICE and share it with that firewall now. So if I wanted to put a rule in the firewall that says, if corporate CEO, if iPad, execute this rule, PX Grid facilitates that intercommunication. The other piece, Netflow, you may have a Netflow collector that, for all intents and purposes, it just knows Netflow. It doesn't know threat grid URL information. Threat grid is the sandbox. It knows what domains on the internet are bad. If I share that information with my Netflow collector, now my Netflow collector not only tells me what the flow data looks like, but it tells me that that particular flow is connecting to a command and control server on the internet, so now my network monitoring is more intelligent from a security perspective. Does that make sense? So you're basically integrating intelligence that the product by itself doesn't have, but because it has this PX Grid connector, it can actually take information from one system to another and leverage it. So that's a really powerful concept, because it now means that you don't have to have one box that supports every possible security intelligence. You can actually leverage what you already have. The MDM info, I need location information to make a decision about geolocation to let this particular user log on to the PS network or to the private network, or I need some inventory information. So PX Grid is really just basically this API, this two-way communication that allows integration between the security products. It's not limited to Cisco either, it's open. So you could take Infoblocks, for instance, could have a PX Grid integration. That use case may be authorized DHCP or DNS based on an identity type, right? If iPad put it in this group or something like that. So there's a lot of combinations that you can do with PX Grid. So here's an example of lane code. Typically, lane code is going to spot something and it's going to say host 1234 standing ports of this host. It's just kind of dry Netflow information. If you take the ICE, the Identity Services Engine, which collects data on the network it's coming from, the location, whether it's a laptop, whether it's a Windows PC or Mac, who the user is, because ICE talks to AD, and now you apply it to lane code and that same flow data. Now lane code can provide you a lot more visibility. Not only is it that single host going to this host, but it's Brian Thomas in Seattle over VPN connected to the finance point of sale system. Normally you would have to go in and you'd have to know your IP addresses in your environment and figure it out yourself, right? So apply that contextual information to flow data. Now you have you can make a much better informed decision, and therefore you might have a threshold here that says, if anybody's connected to the point of sale finance systems over VPN, it violates my PCI compliance. So you throw a log or an error, right? So that's what happens when you start integrating security. Here's another example. LAN code stealth watch. That can also be firepower as well, but in this example it's just LAN code. It has a PX Grid connection to ICE, and it spots, it's not showing, where's the malware? It spots malware on the network right here, and it can actually tell ICE to change the level of permissions for that particular PC on the network and block it, and only allow access to the internet. So now this malware here can't talk to the shared server, the employee server, high risk, all these things. That can all be done just pushing an ACL down, or if it's more complicated, we could kind of change its VLAN, do all sorts of things with it done dynamically based on the perspective of LAN code spotting malware on the network. So at the end of the day, that's what cyber threat defense is really all about, is the integration of these security products and the sharing of the threat intelligence to give you a much more cohesive overall solution. So like I said, easiest place for customers to start is Firepower with AMP, and AMP for endpoints, and just kind of explore the capabilities of putting those two systems together, and then take a look at things like, if you have, anybody have web security appliance from Ironport today, there's actual integrations between those three products at that level as well, where you can permit or deny access to certain web groups and browsing of the internet based on, if you have malware, it only let you go to a remediation site, for instance, all done dynamically. Any questions? That's all I got. I can go into some backup slides if anybody doesn't understand AMP, but that's cyber threat defense today.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.